Hello there. We have an interest in you and your business, and we're running these business lunchtime talks each week. So it's great to have your company as we study the life and the leadership of this man called Joseph. So let us see how we can put the Bible back into business. If we've met before, it's great to have you back. And if we haven't, my name is Trevor Boyd and I'm the minister here in Rathfriland Presbyterian Church. And you can find out more about us by visiting our YouTube channel and explore what we do. Today, in our series on Joseph, we're going to be thinking about Joseph and about his response to being isolated. In terms of business and economy, much has been written about rural isolation and the challenge that it presents for people and for businesses. Being isolated has that feeling attached to it of in some way being far away from other people or far away from facilities and services. Often, as individuals, we can feel isolated. In a sense, we can feel like being the odd one out. Prior to the property crash, banks had a lending criteria in place. And to drive after more business, there were certain banks that changed their criteria. There were those who thought it unwise. But in some ways, they felt isolated. They felt the odd one out. They felt that they were losing out on new business. So they changed their criteria. They changed their formula for their loans on property. It's not pleasant to feel isolated, and yet we know how the property market crashed as banks lent money, as the formula was shown not to be appropriate. So it's not nice, it's not pleasant to feel isolated and left out in business or in life. It's not nice or it's not comfortable to be the odd one out. You know that if you go to a meeting, if you go to an event and you're left standing there on your own, you feel as everyone's looking at you and it's awkward to feel the odd one out. So we're going to read today from Genesis chapter 40. We're going to read 3 verses. We're going to read verse 14 to 15 and then verse 23. And this is Joseph speaking. He says, "But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For indeed, I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and also I have done nothing here that they should put me into the dungeon." And then in verse 23, "Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him." This man, Joseph, he knew what it was to be the odd one out. He knew what it was to feel isolated in life. And as Jacob's son, he felt the odd one out, firstly as his father's favourite, having received the gift of the coat of many colours. He knew what it was like to be isolated in a hole in the ground, not sure what his brothers were plotting to do with him. He felt isolated as a Hebrew, as a foreign national, after being sold into Egypt as a slave. He was cut off from his family and from his culture and from the people that he knew. He felt isolated and awkward and left out. He was then cut off and isolated when he ended up in prison for something he didn't do. And if we're honest, most of us this year, we have felt isolated to some degree during the COVID-19 lockdown. And there are still people today in our community, and they feel isolated because the activities or the events that they normally participated in aren't available to them at this point in time. Of course, and we all have to still keep our distance from each other. Just as in the time of Joseph, There are people today who can be isolated for the same reasons as Joseph, right on our own doorstep, here in Rathfriland or wherever you're listening in from. For example, maybe you work with someone from a different country, or maybe you're from a different country and you feel isolated living and working here. And so as we gather as a business community, thinking of employers, thinking of employees, thinking as colleagues, we can think about what can we do? How can we help each other? What can we, as employers, as employees, and indeed as customers dealing with those people, what can we do to make someone feel less isolated? Now, there are many different reasons why people today can feel isolated. It may be because of their age. They can feel too old or too young. It may be because of their disability or ability. It may be because of their nationality. It may be because of their social status. And for any of these reasons and many others, they can feel isolated. Joseph told this fellow prisoner that when he was released, he was to go and tell Pharaoh, the king of the country of Egypt, that Joseph was still in jail. But the prisoner was released and he didn't do it. And so Joseph was rightly left feeling let down and still isolated because his friend that he had met here in the jail, that he had looked out for, he looked after, he didn't remember him. Nobody seemed to be interested in him after all the good that he had done for the people around him. Joseph, in his life, he was the sort of person who wanted things to be better for his family, for his employers, for his colleagues, and for his friends. Joseph was the sort of person who, despite his isolation, he wanted to make the world a better place. It was a struggle for Joseph to do it, but yet he never gave up in all the record that we have of him. His brothers misunderstood him, but he meant them good, and he did them good. Joseph meant good for Potiphar. He meant good for the prisoners. He meant good for Pharaoh. And despite his challenges of being isolated, of feeling the odd one out, and indeed in many ways of swimming against the tide, he was a person who brought much benefit and brought much blessing to those around him. And so we can rightly ask ourselves that as we look at Joseph and his life and his characteristics, what can we do in some small or even some big way to reduce isolation in our community or with the people that we work with or the people that we live with? How can we help people to feel more at home wherever they live and wherever they work? When we try to help others as an employer, as an employee, then we will see the benefits of that coming back to us. We'll see the benefit that brings in working relationships and in productivity and in profitability. And that's got to be a good thing for all concerned. One of the things at work or in life that can be frustrating is people forgetting about you or people not doing what you ask them to do. You can then start to feel isolated or unimportant. You can feel that you've been forgotten about, you've been left behind. If someone has asked you to do something, will you remember to do it, no matter how small, because it's important when you've been asked to do it? Whenever you think about Joseph, what might the difference have been if the prisoner had remembered about Joseph rather than forgotten about him? Joseph maybe could have done more good with his life. And so if you do what you have promised, think of the good that that could bring to your colleagues or to your family or to your community. And so let's continue to learn from the life of this man called Joseph. Let us help to reduce isolation. Let us help to do good to each other and to reap the benefits of that. So thanks again for sharing your time with us today. To keep exploring leadership and the characteristics of Joseph, well, we encourage you to go and to hit the subscribe button below, to hit the bell so that you are brought up to date and kept up to date with our weekly updates as we learn about the characteristics of Joseph. And we look forward to seeing you in the same place, the same time next week. Thank you.